Welcome, man. Big question here on Morning Kickaround. And say you are a soccer supporter in a lower league in the United States, and your opportunity came to be to get to the top level in United States soccer, get an MLS franchise. Your team is moving on up to the top level, but it comes at the expense of another city and another group of supporters losing their MLS franchise. How do you feel and what do you do?
Yeah, this is an American sports question. We are taking it and turning it to soccer because we have a potential example of this and one that has prompted Ryan Hodek over at Quail City Soccer to write about it from a Sacramento, California perspective because Sacramento has wanted to be in Major League Soccer since the days of yore, 2012. I mean, we're going back a ways when Sacramento kicked off the idea of, hey, we're going to be an MLS town. They've just announced that expansion on their stadium plan. They've got the big ownership group and the local tribe. They've got plans, right? And there is absolutely this idea that those stadium plans are meant as bait, right? As a way to attract Major League Soccer. And this comes at a moment when there is one team in particular in MLS that is in a very dicey situation with their stadium and their locality, and that's the Vancouver Whitecaps. They are very good on the field, but they got problems. They don't own BC Place. They don't control a lot of the revenue. They had to work out a deal last minute just to be able to play there in 2026. They don't have a stadium plan lined up, even though the mayor has said that they are interested in trying to figure that out for the Caps. So could the Caps be relocated, and could it be to Sacramento? And if you are a Sacramento Republic fan, how should you feel about that? And I immediately think about people from Baltimore, hardcore, diehard Ravens fans who had to make peace, some of them too young to remember the Colts, but had to make peace with the fact that their team got stolen from them by Indianapolis. And then years later, was that not even 15 years later, a team gets stolen from Cleveland to move to Baltimore because Art Modell is that guy. And I don't think they think about it anymore, Rob. I really don't. I really don't think Baltimore fans have any compunction about how that all went down because they love their team so much.
And I think with the Americanization, I don't think Baltimore gave two hoots about it from the get-go, to be honest. Like, I remember the 0-2 Super Bowl run. I don't remember, like, anyone going, well, what
They
about
were they were
Cleveland?
good almost immediately, and that certainly made a difference. And like, there was a town starved for football, something to call their own. If you know anything about the Baltimore D.C. metropolitan area, you know that Baltimore people were never going to jump on board with a Washington team. That was absolutely not going to happen. You have Philly up north. Definitely not going to happen. So they were left out in the cold. And so when they got their team, they were like, oh, yeah, of course, this is great. Now, Sacramento has a soccer team. They do. They just don't have an MLS team.
Right.
So this, I think, is a little bit different. And we've seen soccer fans have to figure out how to feel about big bad MLS coming to town or threatening potentially to change the complexion of their soccer culture. You're in the backyard of one of those places in Detroit, where Detroit City, there are hardcore, diehard Detroit City FC fans who go all the way back to Cass Tech who will tell you, not in a million years. The signs are still up at Hamtramck. We don't normally curse on this show, but they say FMLS, and they believe it, right? Now, they've had to make peace with USL, but if MLS came to town one day, I mean, if obviously it would be terrible if they consumed Detroit City and like Detroit City went away and some other new MLS team was in Detroit. Then everybody knows how to feel if you're a Detroit City fan. But
That's
in
an
this
easy
case,
one.
that's an easy one. But in this case, again, like, and by the way, isn't Sacramento right now hosting a Major League Baseball team that is being stolen from Oakland, California? Like, they're having to make peace with. I don't know how Sacramentans feel about that. That's a wild situation.
That's a mental and emotional gymnastics. I mean, like, you're going to go to a park, a ball game where they're like essentially like slumming it in between, their jump to Las Vegas. And I think going back to the Vancouver, and the reason why there is bait out there is because then we see a report saying that Sacramento, Las Vegas, Detroit, and another city were all part of the dangle. Was it maybe even Milwaukee? Like there was definitely some bait out there for a number of different cities to keep that going. And almost in major leagues, they used Las Vegas as bait in the NFL forever as like, if you don't give us X, we're moving there. There's always that kind of that destination. And then so now that puts the pressure on Vancouver to force their way over the line, and it also makes mayors or club owners get real thirsty, possibly in other places across the United States.
Yeah, it's not nice. And anybody who knows my work and my old radio show, which is called the United States of Soccer and focused specifically on American soccer over on Sirius XM, when the whole Anthony Precourt wants to move the Columbus Crew erupted, I very quickly through my show became adamant that you cannot steal the Columbus Crew from Columbus if you want to be different. Maybe MLS doesn't want to be different. I mean, I certainly think that we have people watching the show right now who would say, MLS doesn't want to be different. They want to be the NFL. But they had sold themselves as having soccer's a different culture, soccer's a different community. How many times have we talked about the way that MLS has leaned into its supporter culture to help sell its product in the last 15 years or so? And if you are selling that idea that this is about community, this is about support, this is about passion. It's not that I'm not passionate about the Boston Red Sox, or I'm not passionate about the Denver Broncos. Those are my teams. Or I'm not passionate about some other sports. But soccer is where that word gets thrown around willy-nilly all the time. It's only in soccer that we talk about passion so much. So how can you sell me on the idea of I should have passion for a team you have in my town if there's a chance that if the owner decides he doesn't want to be there or he doesn't like the stadium, he can rip that team out of my town? So Save the Crew, I think, is a cautionary tale. And yes, the Quakes got moved to Houston before the Quakes were replaced in San Jose, right? We've had that happen. We've had clubs fold, 3 of them now in Major League Soccer. I guess you could argue LAFC replaced Chivas. But this is not a look I think MLS wants to engage in. And I don't think, Ryan is writing about it and say, let's talk about how we feel. They wouldn't care. Sacramento wouldn't care. And I hate to be cynical about it, but they would not care.
I think I've asked the commenters in the section of the viewers previously when we've talked about something like this, in Orlando or other cities, Portland, where they did go from USL, or Minnesota, they went from USL to MLS. Do you miss the old USL days? And while obviously there was a small polling here within the show, there was no one that said they missed the USL days at all. And would the DCFC, if that MLS reality happened and say the entity as it is goes away, and even if they rebranded the MLS Detroit that way, would time just make that melt away? Probably not for most. There's probably hardcores that it would never. But.
Sure, there are some people you would leave behind. And by the way, it's fair to say that none of these clubs can be all things to all people, right? So there's unfortunately, there's a lane that you have to pick. Now, I think that, this is also wrapped up in this idea of what do we want our soccer clubs to be? Because if you want your soccer club to be able to play at the highest level of the game, particularly in this part of the world, and we might talk about the CONCACAF Champions Cup in a second, well, then you gotta make peace with it being a corporate monster or being attached to a corporate monster and being able to spend the money on players like Son. Right? If you want your team to be beating Cruz Azul in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, well, you better be okay with them dropping $25 million on Sun. And to get $25 million, they got to have some very rich owners, and those very rich owners are going to have some things they want, and the stadium is going to look a certain way. And your access as a fan is going to be limited, meaning to the team itself. But if you don't want that, if you're okay with your team playing 2, 3, 4 levels below that, man, you could have an incredibly intimate experience with your club. You can have an Oakland County experience. You can have a Portland Hearts of Pine experience. You can have I know the players. They're basically my pals. I can go see them in the grocery store. That guy plays center back. Hey, what's up? You can do that if your team does not play or does not aspire to be this massive success story in both commercially and on the field. But again, you can't be both those things. MLS used to be like that because it was fairly low rent. They weren't spending a lot of money. They were trying to attract players, that really had no other options. And I know super fans of MLS, friends of mine that I've talked to and interacted with on the internet for 20 years, who will tell you it was better when. It was better when I could go up to Shalrie Joseph and say hi. But again, MLS was never going to stand pat. So if you want that, you better be living in a place that has a different kind of team, right? And Sacramento will lose as much as they're one of the bigger USL championship teams in terms of ambition and stadium capacity, filling up their stadium and all those things. And in a significant town, they're going to lose something if they go MLS. That's 100% a fact.
Yeah, I missed something indeed. Yeah, with every gain, it's almost like a window. Someone at the bottom or at the other end of the spectrum, falls off the table, so to speak. But it's interesting that you said that about OCFC experience. Like we literally have after parties, and there was a couple games where staff, players, coaches, and fans were all hanging out and socializing together. And maybe there's a modesty needed in the unusual place that in the culture that soccer finds itself. There's incredible imbalance where some places can pack 70,000, some can only pack 2 or 3,000, and like those both have merit, and maybe some places need to start at that more humble level. And then maybe that's where one of the next developments is that in between level that the League for Clubs and other places are going for. It's places where people have the passion, but maybe not the widespread ability to pack super modern futuristic stadiums. But are we coming to the conclusion, or at least I think it sounds like you are, that you'd say just move on and don't look in the rearview mirror if they are fortuitous at someone else's loss.
Look,
And would Vancouver try to go somewhere else? Would it exist in a different league or something?
Well, there is a Canadian Premier League team that plays in Vancouver.
Second,
that
Vancouver,
would not be the Whitecaps. And again, the Whitecaps have one of those kind of standard North American club histories, which is they were a NASL club and then they didn't exist. And there was a team called the 86ers, I think the 80s. And then the Whitecaps came back to play in USL Pro or whatever it was called, the A League, that history. Sort of like the Sounders and the Timbers, right? You're connecting to that past. I imagine somebody would try to find a way to restart the Whitecaps if they left. I don't want them to leave because I don't think moving clubs is ever okay. I do not think that is ever okay. So when you think about Sacramento, like Sacramento can want an MLS team, but they shouldn't get it at the expense of the Vancouver fans. I don't believe that is correct. The relationship between sports fans, and if we want to make it about our particular passion and make soccer a little bit special, fine, soccer fans. It's not a consumer relationship in a traditional way, right? It's not a business selling me a product and I buy it. No, I didn't like this. I'm going to return it to the store. You are asking for my emotional investment as much as you are asking for my money. You are asking me to care about your product in a way that most people don't care about the widget that they bought, right? It's not a blender. It's a soccer team. And if you are going to ask that from me, I ask from you some care for this thing that you are not just an owner of. Yes, on paper, technically, legally, you're an owner. You can do with it what you want within the constructs of the league. Understand. But in spirit, that is not the case. That is not the relationship. You are a custodian of something that matters to me. Take care of it for me. And I think Sacramento fans, the smart ones, Ryan, will understand. Like we shouldn't be doing that. They also still want their team. And again, the cynical part of me is that if it happened in a couple of years, you won't hear anything more about how Sacramento stole a team from Vancouver. But one way of looking at that is, well, we didn't steal them. They had nowhere else to go, and they needed a place, and they came to Sacramento. But then you would get into that whole discussion of like, is the Sacramento Republic a new team in MLS? Are they a continuation of the Whitecaps? Do they take the records?
Yeah. Do they get completely chopped like San Diego Loyal and then disappear? And the Sacramento Whitecaps. Does that have a ring to it? Probably not.
They're not doing that. They're not doing that. They're
Sacramento Whitecaps would be outrageous. Would be absolutely outrageous. But continue in the comments, guys. If you're watching this afterwards, definitely fill up the comments and questions section. We do check in on those and would love to get your thoughts on that. Is the big question, would you feel any sort of remorse if your lower league team or city without a team even takes or is the benefactor of Vancouver losing their MLS franchise?